Hi, my name is Monika Heupel, and I'm a professor of international and European politics at the University of Bamberg, and I'm the author of Relational Legitimation in Dense Institutional Environments, the Case of the UN Special Procedures. What I do in my article is to develop a concept that I call relational legitimation, and I do this in relation to international institutions. The concept is composed of two theoretical building blocks, namely legitimation theory and relationalism. Legitimation is commonly understood as the attribution of legitimacy to oneself or to others, and relationalism essentially assumes that it's not actors but relations that are the key categories of analysis. The concept of relational legitimation then implies that international institutions legitimate themselves by establishing links to actors or institutions that they believe are recognized as legitimate by relevant audiences. The mechanism behind this is that addressees of legitimation practices use heuristics when they assess an international institution. So, in other words, they do not assess the international institution directly, but they kind of extrapolate on the basis of their assessment of relative others with whom the international institution is associated. I assume that international institutions use three relevant frames in this process. First, an authorization frame when they point out that they have been given their mandate by a relevant authority. Second, an alignment frame when they emphasize that their interpretations and actions are in line with those of relevant others. And third, a cooperation frame when they emphasize that they work together with relevant actors when executing their mandate. I also assume that references to epistemic authorities are particularly attractive, and if we consider global power inequalities, this should apply particularly to references to epistemic authorities from the West. And finally, I expect that international institutions that are embedded in a family of institutions frequently associate themselves with other institutions from this family. To probe these expectations, I turn to the special procedures of the UN Human Rights Council. I have selected two of them that are supported by groups of states with different ideological leanings, namely the Special Rapporteur on Unilateral Sanctions and the Independent Expert on Sochi Rights. As data, I have selected all 16 thematic annual reports that have been published by the mandate holders up to 2023, and I use qualitative content analysis as method. I have also conducted an interview with one of the mandate holders to be able to better understand and contextualize the findings, and in addition to that, I have coded a couple of other similar reports from other institutions to be able to say something about the generalizability of my findings. But what are my findings? I find that relational legitimation actually occurs quite frequently. On average, I find 6 instances on every document page that I have coded. And this number is very similar for both special procedures, and it's actually also very stable over time. I find indeed that all 3 frames are used. So mandate holders emphasize that they have received their mandate from the UN Human Rights Council. They mention that their interpretations and actions are very much in line with those of other relevant actors in institutions, and this is actually the most frequently used frame. And they also report that they cooperate with relevant others when they execute their mandate, and they do this also on a regular basis. I also see, as I had expected, that references are primarily made to epistemic authorities, and especially those from the West, and to other UN institutions, so to other family members. And this also applies to both mandates, and it's also pretty stable over time. What are the implications of these findings? The key implication for me is that we cannot fully understand the discursive legitimation practices of international institutions if we only focus on the 3 classic narratives relating to purpose, procedures, and performance. These are important, without any doubt, but we also need to take relational legitimation practices into account if we want to get a fuller picture. And a second implication might be that relational legitimation practices can possibly also have an integrative function, especially when very different actors, like in my case, build connections to the very same actors and institutions, even if we certainly have a bias towards Western actors and institutions here. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoy reading the paper.